Welcome again this afternoon, and then also just kind of give you a snapshot of some of the things that we've been talking about since the discovery of those 215. And it's very tragic that what took place, and then on the other hand, we're thankful for the survivors that continue to speak up and to say that there were children that never made it home. And they wanted those children that were never made it home to be found. And so I just want to thank those survivors and myself and others that talked about them to those people that were supposed to do something. And so I thank them for their perseverance and endured all the craziness that was outside. And Kinixie Kamloops were able to successfully discover those unmarked graves. As a result of that, other schools came along, and the numbers are growing. And then here in Siksikaw, they're going to be doing the same thing that they're doing at other schools. And we talked about that and some other stuff in respect to the decision, historical event. How did residential school came to be in? And no doubt the federal government had a role in it, and along with the schools, the churches were involved in it, and identified some of the decisions that were made back then. As a result, a residential school was born. And there were some quotes that were quoted in respect to the minister of the day, not only one minister, but several ministers. And what they said was they will establish those Indian residential school to kill the Indian in the child. And so those are in documents today. So we talked about that. And then also we talked briefly about what are some of the next steps we should be looking at. And we clearly mentioned that there are next steps that are available. And a lot of work has been put to them, and a lot of people have been made those available to us through their hard work and consulting with lawyers and different ones. And at the end of the work that Nixie, a TRC group, under the direction of the chairman, Murray Sinclair, were able to come up with what they called were there 79? Call to actions. And then also it outlines some things that everybody needed to do, especially with the federal government, identified their role and the others their role. And as a result of those discoveries that they heard through the interviews of hundreds of people across Canada. And then the United Nations Declaration. Those are some steps in there that we could do. Documents that have been left dormant, those things are available today. So we could use those as the next steps. And today, Francis Butch Wolfleg is here, and we want to talk briefly about how did the question have been asked, how did you guys survive while you were in school? What were those things that allow you to carry on in spite of the things that took place in your own life at a very young age, like when you were 7, 8, 12 years old? What were the things as a young boy that you used to help you to survive? in residential school. So those are some of the things that we want to quickly mention and talk to you about today. And there are many things that we could talk to, but it allowed us just for a moment to have a safe haven to go back into those resourcefulness of those days that we were seeing, not only experiencing ourselves the horrendous things that took place in residential school, and seeing others getting abused at the same time. We saw some things that were taught to us, the traditional values, richness of our culture, and the prayers of our parents and our elders. And then those things that we were able to, just for a moment, to shut everything else, but to engage ourselves into those things that we found a little bit of comfort in those dark days, and a little light in our hearts to carry on. And what were those things? So I want to share with Francis Butch to allow him to speak some of those things that he found and others were able to use to get them to make it through residential school.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. I'm glad to be here again. I'm very grateful that Vincent alluded to the survivors that are here in our nation and elsewhere across Canada, even into the States, which is who are ramping up their efforts also to recognize this dark period within our countries. But here in Canada, the survivors are, as Vincent mentioned, they managed to rely on survival skills to be able to make it through those years in residential school. One of them that I look at is the regimented course of the day, where you were told when to eat, when to sleep, when to pray, when to eat, when to wash, and everything was all regimented to the point that even if there was a little break in the routine, it really kind of made you wonder what was going on. And there'd be a few of those, especially when doctors would come in and take us and do our medical, without our permission, of course, whatever they needed to check up on, and what medicines we were given, and those were never explained to us. So for me, one of the things that stands out is that this regimented daily activities, when a lot of survivors are a lot more flexible regarding their schedules, and so their lives are based a lot on spontaneity and doing something at the moment. And so our planning skills were a little weak after that, but we learned how to work with that in order to achieve certain tasks and jobs that we had to do. For me, one of the things that I brought back from residential school regarding survival was just a simple act of having food. In residential school, there was always a lack of food, and so you're always getting up hungry and going to bed hungry. And for me, that is something that I've really strived to get the resources, whether I'm working or if I'm short, I will go and ask for assistance, so that the food is maintained in the house, especially for my children. And now it has gone to my grandchildren now, that there is always enough food. And that there is I'm not used to giving out certain portions to everybody. I make sure that everybody eats until they're full. So I never want my children or my grandchildren to go to bed hungry or wake up hungry. And so that's one area that I'm very keen on every day in regards to having that kind of sustenance at home. The other thing that residential school, prayer, because we had to go, as part of that regimented time, we had to go to church a lot. And we just went through the motions because we didn't understand the language of the services and what the significance of certain passages and whatever, even though the passages in some ways contradicted what was being done to us at the school. And so you really, just like you talk about the love of the God, but that wasn't displayed with these people that were telling us about this. And so inevitably I moved away from the church. And I was still very hesitant to go back to our culture, even though I had been raised with it during those periods of time that I was away from the residential school, and also with our annual another word for that was the Sundance, where we would do our ceremonies, and it was a total total breakaway from the church and the school, where we had a chance to be ourselves, so to speak. And so for me, those became, as a result of moving away from the church, and at the same time relearning some passages that we had been given, some lessons in church that were similar to our cultural values that we were raised with. That brought on a resurgence of my faith and the importance of prayer, the importance of learning. And as I had mentioned before, my late older brother was an ordained Anglican minister. And for me, when I was younger, we actually had Sunday school, which kind of, we had our own parents and neighbors and aunts and uncles that gave us these lessons in the Bible, and which were really a way of reconnecting to those values that the church wasn't giving us in residential school. I mean, they were giving them to us, but they were very, their actions were totally opposite from what they were telling us. So growing up, that's, for me, it was a rediscovery of the importance of prayer, and also the reconnecting with Creator in different ways. And that I see a lot of our people that will gravitate towards certain denominations that satisfies that need, where the church now is actually practicing those. Just to give you an example of how that was, when I first stopped drinking back in the early 70s, we were about towards the middle of the 70s, the place where I worked, we had some work to do down in San Diego, and we were down there for about 2 weeks. And on that weekend, on that Sunday, I went downtown San Diego, and because I had glimpsed a really nice looking cathedral, so I went there. And they had speakers outside, and the choir was practicing, and so I just sat out there and listened to the choir, and then the people started arriving for a church. It was a Catholic church. And just going, the people were going in there kind of giving me a quick look, kind of looking, but not really looking at me, but noticing that I'm just sitting outside the church there. And when they all went in there, I decided, well, I'll go in and sit in. And it just, I was more fascinated with the church, how nice it looked. It's one of those Spanish-style cathedrals, and I just forget the name of it, but it's right downtown San Diego. And I went in there and I sat down in the back. Didn't want to intrude. Everybody was kind of sat up front, and I was sitting there. And next thing, one of the people in those pews came back, and he asked me a question. He said, "Are you with this congregation?" And I said, "No, I'm from Canada." And he said, "Well, this service is for this congregation," which in a way singled me out that the service wasn't for me. So rather than create a scene in there, I just have to temper my anger, I walked out and just sat outside where I had sat before and listened to the service. It was on those speakers and the choir singing, and it was all over. Everybody was coming out, and of course the father was standing there shaking everybody's hand. And after everybody moved on, I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden the father came down to me and he said, "I seen you walk in and then you left. What did that person say to you? Because I seen somebody approach you and tell you something and you left." So I told him what I had been told, and he just shook his head and he said, our people have a lot to learn. Why don't you come in with me and I'll share my lunch with you. So I went in there with him over into the side of the church there. He has got a little office there, and the lunch was brought in, which was kind of surprised the nun that brought the food in. But he just told him that he's my guest, and he started asking me questions where I was from, and then we had a nice little friendly visit, and we ate, and then he asked me if I wanted to have communion. And I said, sure. So we had communion right there, just him and myself, him serving me, and that's how I walked out of that church. For me, it kind of, at the beginning, it was kind of a lot of anger, but at the same time, there was this father that epitomized the value of helping, and he was doing his work. And it really gave me a uplifted feeling. And little actions like that can be very detrimental if it turns the other way, which is kind of like I guess you could say the bad way. But there's a lot to be learned from people who actually walk their service to people. And from then on, I went back to the ceremonies, which instilled in me more of the values. So things like that from residential school. And even though one of the things that I did for my children was I prepared them at a certain age as to how to react to people that are going to be, I put it in a way that they could understand, that are going to be mean to you because you're an Indian, which is nowadays it's a well used word called racism and prejudice. So those actions I had prepared my children to confront in a proper way, rather than getting angry and striking out, because I knew they would be in the wrong even though their actions justified their response. So I instilled in them the value of kindness, especially towards people that are being mean to them. My late father used to always tell us, "Matukaksi satup kimmapipits." There's no defense against kindness. And also he had other words that kind of stick in my mind in regards to working. He always said, which means white people respect the hard work that we do, where they will treat us as equals. So those are some of the lessons that I learned in regards to people acting and doing things such as racist actions and prejudice and so forth. So those are just a few things I can think of that
Yeah.
kind of left residential school with and started acting on them.
Thank you, Butch, for sharing that. I think those are very key, and I think they're very important for us to learn at such a young age. And when that question was brought to me, I mean, to be like 8 years old, what are some of the things that helped me? And I think the first thing that comes into mind was we had other friends around, same age, and we kind of supported each other. And they would talk to me in Blackfoot, and we're going to go home. We always encourage each other. Friday's coming, weekends coming, Christmas is coming, summer holidays are coming. And the loneliness a lot of those kids felt, and my own heart too. But it was the friends that were around. That is something that's very resourceful to me. And I don't know how much I could have lasted without them. But we supported each other. And sometimes when you're talking about food, I can remember many times when we were sent to bed and we were starving. We wanted to eat, and there was always somebody that somehow, even a slice of bread, they tuck it under their shirt, and they knew they would get hungry later on, so that's how resourceful some of them were. And they would share just even a bite of a bread was something that was, so we had these friends that helped us to get it, to make it through the day, to make it through the week, the month, and to enjoy the holidays that we were looking forward to. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that I immersed myself into, once somebody recognized that I could skate, and the coaches said, "Skate hard, we need you." Once somebody said, "We need you, we want you to be a part of the team," it was very good to hear that. It was music to my ears to hear somebody say, "I need you, we want you to be a part of the team." Once you heard that, you excel even more to please the coach. And so I remember one of the things I told the coach was, "How do I skate?" He just told me, every moment you get, every chance you can get out there. So I remember putting on those skates. Some of them, like I wore like size 3 shoes, size 4 shoes, and the only ones that were available were like size 9, size 10, but we were resourceful. We would stuff those skates, and then we would use the hockey socks to put our little feet into those big skates. We went skating, we skate hard, and we developed that skill. It took us time, a lot of falling, but we it helped us to just to shut those moments off, and where we could just immerse in ourselves to say, I want to be a part of that. I was told they need me, and so once I made it into the team, there was nothing holding me back. I just wanted to please the coach. I wanted to help our team, and so those were the things that I remembered. The other thing I remembered was that the values that we were taught. I remembered those values so important to me. I would go home, the times that I did go home, and my mom and my older siblings would teach us some traditional values. And you didn't have to wait for Sunday to be taught, but you can be taught, like you said, around the table as we're eating. I would say these are important. I'd say, "Aki krumatsumais tapio, aku tuichikaki, apinakos." And so those planted a seed in my head, in my brain, that I needed to be thankful. And so those values were taught to us, and the richness of who we are. Pinumatskokset, namikakiman. Missy, don't do those things. Siske, pisti otuichikatumia, estutsumia, suksatu. They wanted us to see the good thing in us, and to be able to walk in a good way that they felt was important. And those values were taught to us. As a result of those values that we went into to help us get by when we were 8, 10 years old, now we're teaching those to our grandchildren. We're teaching those to our children, and telling them, you can do it, you can make it, and so forth. Those are excellent tools today. They're not just words, but there were practices. There were practices that were taught in our home, and they lived it. And there were times that I saw them get discouraged. Maybe they couldn't find a job, but they knew that we got to keep at it. So those kind of things, the personal strength and the values that they were taught, were things that were important to me, that helped me get by those days, and so much more. And I think I saw some of my friends, a good friend of mine, and I really admired him. He would sit down on the desk, get a piece of paper, and he would draw. And it took him several days to draw. And when it was over, it was a masterpiece. And those pictures are gone. I don't know if somebody has one of them, but I admired that. He was so tedious and detailed. He wanted to make sure everything was done in a good way. And he got lost in it, and he took pride in it. And it was our job to say, I wish I can be like you. So those kind of stuff. And I think that's key. To this day, we need to support each other. And like, I've known Butch all my life, and him and I, we grew up in residential school. We were friends, and he kind of wandered away, and I wandered away. But we came back. We always came back, and then that friendship that we grew up with remained strong, remained steady, and I need him. And this videotape that we're doing, I get a lot of strength from him, and I give him support and all the things that he does. And I think one of the things that I value the most is when I, in return, give honor to people, and some of the things that they're very qualified, and they're very experienced, and they can do those jobs very well. And one of the things that I know Butch can do very well is to MC in a powwow. And so I admire those things. And for me to get jealous of him, that's not the values that we were brought up with. We were taught to support each other and to encourage each other. Those are the things. When the question is asked, how did you survive in those dark days, dark moments when you were a young child? Those are the key things that we wanted to mention briefly. And I know we don't want to take too much time. We want to wrap this up because hopefully this video will go to classrooms, not only when we're alive, but when we get older. These things will talk for us. And so you got any last words for today?
For me, I guess just some last words. I think in future sessions, how it would be in regards to the resilience and survival of our language, such as me and Vincent, we're quite fluent in our language. And there needs to be a time when we could be able to talk to you in our language. And that can be made for future reference. And we can talk and then interpret at the same time and so forth, so that you will get the understanding for our young people. And now they're beginning to learn the language. They're understanding it, but they're still missing the feeling of it because of the fact that they're moving from an English language to Blackfoot, whereas for us, it's so natural just to talk in Blackfoot. And then sometimes we try and, when we're speaking English, we have to really think, because now we have to look at the closest English translation to something that we want to share with you. And when we speak Blackfoot, it just rolls out naturally. So that's something that maybe in future sessions we can take a look at that. But I also want to thank Vincent. As he said, we grew up together. We kind of went down the path of addictions, and later on we got back together again. And there's never any dead air between us when we're together. We're always talking. There's always stories to share. And the one thing that we share quite passionately is how our families are doing, and our children and our grandchildren, and now our great-grandchildren. So there's quite a legacy here, just from each of us individually as being survivors. So thank you for listening, and we'll be talking at you.